Welcome to a new edition of Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, and we've had a bit of a hiatus, but we're back in business. And today our first guest is T.G. Vallas, Theodore Vallas, Ted Vallas. Most everybody knows you as T.G.
That's correct, Tom.
You've been in Oceanside for many years. You were manager of your uncle's properties, the El Camino Country Club, and now you have a cleaning business, ducts. So that's what you're doing now.
Air duct cleaning specialist. Yeah, we do. We're indoor air specialists, and we clean commercial and residential.
Main thing I want to talk to you about is you had quite a career in the Air Force during the Vietnam War, and I want to talk a little bit about that. You graduated from Arizona State University, and you learned to fly before you went into the Air Force. Tell me about that.
That's right. When I was at Arizona State University, I received my wings as a commercial pilot from Sky Harbor Airport, out of Sky Harbor Airport, while I was attending Arizona State University.
Well, you were in ROTC there, weren't you?
I was in Air Force ROTC, and they had a program where they paid for our attaining our private pilot's license, and then I went on to get my commercial license while I was at it.
So you were one step ahead when you got into the Air Force, when you went on active duty.
That's right. We started out at Casa Grande Airport in the Arizona desert, and we flew the T-41, which is the Air Force version of the 172. And
most people remember the old World War II movies where they were flying the biplanes, the dual wings. But
this was a high wing Cessna 172. It just didn't have the back seat in it.
Probably you flew it as getting your private license, didn't you?
I flew the 150 when I was getting my Cessna 150.
But it's basically the same aircraft, just a little bigger.
A little bigger, right.
Yeah. So you qualified at Casa Grande for the 172.
To enter into primary jet training at Williams Air Force Base, and then to go on to advanced jet training.
Well, Williams is now the gateway airport over in the eastern part of Phoenix, the metropolitan area. But
that's correct.
That was quite a training base.
It was, and ironically, my wife pinned my wings on me when I graduated from pilot training at Williams Air Force Base, exactly 10 years to the day after I graduated from the 8th grade at the same base.
Is that right? Yeah, your father was in the military, wasn't he?
He was in the military, Tom, and he served in the Navy. I was born at North Island down in Coronado in 1944. And he served in the Navy, Coast Guard after the war was over. And then he went into the Army Air Corps. And then the Army Air Corps split into the Army and the Air Force, and he chose to go into the Air Force. So he made all the branches of the service except the Marine Corps. Yeah. And my Marine friends remind me of that.
Well, tell me, what was it like going from the 172 into jets?
It was quite a, it took a lot of catching up, we used to say. It seemed like that first initial ride in a high-performance jet, you're playing catch up, and I enjoyed flying, very much, and basically the primary jet trainer was side by side, a Cessna product, also. It was a T-37, They referred to it as the tweet because it made a real shrill noise. And then we performed acrobatics and spin recoveries and some formation flying in the T-37 and a lot of instrument training in the T-37.
And this was all at Williams?
At Williams. And then we graduated into the advanced jet training, which was a T-38 Talon, and it was front seat, back seat, with our instructors in the back seat. And that was primarily formation flying and then some more advanced instrument flying.
And you moved on to George Air Force Base up at Victorville?
At Victorville.
So you did everything in the West?
I did.
Yeah.
Except for survival training. And survival training started out sea survival training in Miami, Florida, and then land survival training in Spokane, Washington, right on the Canadian border, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And then jungle training, survival training at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines.
Where were you when you were sent over to Vietnam?
I was at KOCT Royal Thai Air Force Base in the center of Thailand, and I flew over.
I guess my question is, how did you get there? Did you fly your fighter over, or did
No,
you?
we flew commercial.
Okay.
Over and to Don Muang in Thailand, and then they picked us up by bus there and took us to KOCT Royal Thai Air Force Base.
Now, is that where you operated out of?
We operated out of the center of Thailand. There were about 9 bases in Thailand during the Vietnam War, and we were right in the center of the country, flying over North Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and a few missions in South Vietnam, but mostly North Vietnam and Laos.
What was it like on that first flight, that first sortie, the first combat flight?
Well, you know, people often ask me what combat is like, and I always answer by saying that it's hours and hours of sheer boredom interrupted by brief moments of stark terror. And that's exactly what it is, Tom. You know, you do. Our flights were lengthy. We flew the F-4E Phantom. I have a model here of it. And we were called the most photographed wing in Southeast Asia. I was in the 388 TAC Fighter Wing, and we had the tiger teeth painted on the nose of the aircraft because we had the internally mounted Gatling gun in the nose. And we carried an array of different weaponry when we went on a mission, and we always air-to-air refueled because we were quite a ways away from the action in North Vietnam in particular.
That got to be, I mean, learning how to do that was a little dicey, wasn't it?
It was a little dicey. You know, actually, I'll be honest with you, I flew both in the front seat and the back seat of the F-4 Phantom too, and it was easier to air-to-air refuel from the back seat than it was from the front seat.
Now, why would you be in the back seat?
Well, we initially trained in the back seat of the F-4 and then upgraded to the front seat.
As a pilot or as a REO?
As a pilot. And then the Air Force was trying to put navigators in the back seat so they could free up more of the pilots for the front
Where did you learn how to do air-to-air refueling? Did you do that?
I did that at combat crew training at Victorville.
Yeah.
Up in the high desert.
Did you ever miss? Do you have to try 2 or 3 times before you hooked up?
Sometimes you'd get a little what they call pilot-induced operations, where PIO they called it, and where you were overcorrecting, you know, but you had to make small movements on that boom. You know, and then when by the time we got to Southeast Asia, you know, we were well trained in air-to-air refueling. How much would
you take on? How many gallons? Or I guess you'd measured it in pounds.
In pounds, yeah. It was measured in pounds, and typically when we hit the tanker, we would take on about 3,500 pounds of.
How much is that in gallons? Did you ever break it down?
I never did break it down. Yeah.
So when you're flying out of Thailand, how long a flight what would be the average length?
Our average mission from the takeoff to the returning to the base, was about 3 hours. And that was interrupted by the air-to-air refueling, prior to hitting the target.
How long, with just normal flight, how long could you stay in the air with just a tank, with just one fueling?
One fueling,
Yeah.
about 3.5 hours.
Yeah. So, were you ever intercepted by the North Vietnamese?
Oh yes. Yeah. We had what they called rules of engagement, and depending on our fuel load and what weaponry we were carrying and things like that, either when we used to bomb over North Vietnam, we were either mid-cap, which this aircraft is set up for mid-cap because it has the missiles on the rails, and then it has other missiles in the belly of the aircraft.
These big ones here are fuel tanks?
Those are fuel tanks.
Yeah.
And you either mid-cap, where you would take on the MiGs and keep the MiGs off of the flight, or you were ground bombing and ground attack, they called it.
How low would you get?
Well, we were restricted to not being below 1,500 feet.
Sounds to me, with that smile, it looks like
well,
you might have been broke that rule.
I doubt that there was a pilot that served in Vietnam that didn't at one time or another come back with a little bit of a coconut tree in the bottom of an aircraft, And particularly, when you were doing what we called a SAR effort, which is search and rescue for a downed pilot.
Yeah.
You would hang it out then, and it wasn't uncommon to come out with a damaged aircraft, return with a damaged aircraft at that point.
Did you? I guess the question that a lot of people would have watching at home, did you have any? Did you shoot down any planes?
No, I didn't. I didn't have the opportunity to do that.
Did you primarily do bombing, or did you do any?
Mostly bombing, and we took out bridges, tunnels. The nickname of the 388th TAC Fighter Wing at KOCT was the Wrecking Crew, and they called us the Wrecking Crew because we would take out so many trucks that were bound for South Vietnam through the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And the Ho Chi Minh Trail, Tom, was far from a trail. It was a massive inner network of well-maintained roads under a triple jungle canopy. And so it was most of the trucks that we were taking out were at nighttime. When they were traveling, they traveled very seldom during the day, and when they did, they got knocked out. And so we were taking out trucks, we were taking out AAA guns, we were taking out petroleum vehicles, that they'd station along the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
They were covered. There was a lot of canopy of foliage over them, but there were places where you could obviously see them, so you knew where they were going.
That's right. Our forward air controllers, which were light aircraft, lightly armed and light aircraft. They were a Bird Dog was one, which was a single engine tail dragger, and then there was we had Hammer Fax forward air controllers, and they were in O2s, and then we had OV-10s, which were
okay. We're going to take a short break right here and for a couple of messages, and we'll be right back with TG Vallas.
Flying at 600 miles per hour and turning 9 times the force of gravity is one of the most amazing things I've ever done. I'm Heath Voss, Supercross racer. Whether you want to fly at the speed of sound or hit a jump on a dirt bike and fly 50 feet in the air, you have to work hard, stay focused, and make some tough choices to accomplish your goals. Make the right choices today and be ready for the challenges tomorrow. This message brought to you by the U.S. Air Force.
Plant inspiration. Provide youth with the creative tools and skills to cultivate it. And you'll be amazed at what can grow. Adobe Youth Voices and the Peapod Foundation. Learn more at plantandinspire.org.
We're back with T.G. Vallas, fighter pilot during the Vietnam War. T.G., you were awarded 2 distinguished flying crosses.
That's correct, Tom.
Tell me about the incidents that you...
Well, one of them, I happened to be, that particular day, I happened to be in the back seat. It was a 2-ship mission, and I had a
2-ship, you mean 2 planes?
2 aircraft. 2 aircraft, yeah, just 2 aircraft.
That's kind of dicey, isn't it?
It was dicey. We went out on a routine mission, and I had a new young man in the front seat of my aircraft, and it was kind of his introduction to combat flying in Southeast Asia. When we got on the tanker, our mission was changed to a high priority mission, and high priority meant that, you know, it took precedence over any other mission that we were what we call fragged for. Mm-hmm. And we immediately were taken after our fuel load was over. We met a forward air controller, and it was over Laos. And on the ground were friendly troops, Royal Laotian Armed Forces. Friendly troops were surrounded by several thousand North Vietnamese regulars, and they were being annihilated. They just were by mortars and artillery and small arms fire. And so when we got there, we didn't have the particular type of weaponry that was required for what we call close-in support of friendly forces. And but they were begging us to drop our weapons, you know, because they were really being pounded. Mm-hmm. And so so we went ahead and went on a discrete frequency and talked it over and decided to go ahead and drop our weapons in spite of the fact that we didn't have any high drag weapons, nor did we have any napalm.
So you were concerned about hitting the friendly enemy.
The friendly forces.
Yeah, friendly forces.
And we were also concerned about delivering slick bombs off of our F-4 Phantoms.
What's a slick bomb?
A slick bomb is where it doesn't have any tail fins, and the tail fins would allow it to go down slowly while we got out of the way. And you come in low and slow when you're delivering those weapons. But you have good control, you know, between the good guys and the bad guys.
Yeah.
And what happened was we talked it over and decided to go ahead and deliver our slick bombs, even though it was very dangerous for us, low and slow, you know, so we could get a feel for what was on the ground. And the danger there is that 2 of your bombs, if they came together, you know, would blow you out of the sky, you know, and so it was a dicey situation. So what we did was we went ahead and dropped our weaponry on multiple passes, and we got pounded by AAA as we were making the passes, all those passes. And because we only had one canyon that we could come out of the target area from. Mm-hmm. Well, as it turned out, we changed they were totally surrounded, and we opened up a gaping hole in where they were surrounded and took and annihilated a bunch of the individuals that were attacking the friendly forces, and the friendly forces ended up chasing them into the jungle, capturing a great deal of their weaponry and a lot of their troops.
So that was you were decorated because you saved a lot of people.
We were decorated, ironically, because unbeknownst to us at the time, the commanding officer of the Royal Laotian Armed Forces was one of them. It was General Vang Pao, happened to be on the ground. And we later found out when they were giving our bomb damage assessment over the frequency of the forward air controller that we were working with, we heard him on the ground saying, Sierra Hotel, you're number one, GI, you know. And I said, you know, who was that? And the forward air controller said, you've just been saluted by the commanding officer of the Royal Laotian Armed Forces, General Vang Pao. And it was General Vang Pao that turned us in for the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Oh, God, well, that was great. What happened on the second award?
The second award was a night mission. It was on the border between Cambodia and South Vietnam, and there I happened to be with our squadron commander in a two-ship with our squadron commander. We flew two-ship at night, so we wouldn't run into each other. Mm-hmm. And a gunship, an AC-130 gunship, was just being hammered by AAA guns, you know, because the gunships were in orbit, and they were in orbit at a certain altitude with their guns firing from an open door in the side of it, and they were a transport aircraft, and they were being just totally hammered by the AAA, and so we needed to take out the AAA.
AAA, what?
That's anti-aircraft weapons on the ground, and you could, that night you could see it coming up at you, and no matter where you turned, you know, you were turning into AAA fire.
Yeah.
And
well, couldn't those C-130s climb out and get away from them?
Yeah, but they were what they were trying to do was evacuate friendly forces that were on the ground.
I see, okay.
And they were doing it all night long. The helicopters were going in and doing that all night long. And the gunship, and they
providing cover?
They were providing cover as they were withdrawing the troops.
Those things with those automatic machine guns on it, you'd think that how could anything survive?
I know it.
It was a hell of a weapon just by itself.
It was.
So anyway.
So we took out the AAA sites, and the Spectre gunship was able to perform his mission, you know, and he took a lot of hits. We came back, you know, without any hits, but he took a lot of hits, you know, that particular evening. But we totally silenced the gunfire, the AAA gunfire that was coming up on him.
And that's what you were decorated for?
We were decorated for that. We were turned in for the Distinguished Flying Cross from the commanding officer of the gunship, Spectre gunship, that we saved that particular
Of the awards that the Air Force gives out, where does the Distinguished Flying Cross, where does that rank?
Oh, you have the Congressional Medal of Honor as the highest award.
Yeah.
And then in the Air Force, you have the Silver Star, and then the Distinguished Flying Cross is next in line. So I'm proud to have received 2, but I have friends that received 4. You know.
Did you come back with a lot of damage on any of your missions?
On several, yeah. We took mostly AAA. You know, occasionally fragments from an exploding SAM, that's surface-to-air missile, and but in that case it was generally fragments, you know, of the missile. I was never hit by a SAM.
I was going to say, were they pretty hard to outrun or outmaneuver, or
we had what was called a SAM break, and you as either a 2-ship or a 4-ship, and usually a 4-ship. When we went over Vietnam, we usually went 16 aircraft or 32 aircraft, you know, on a heavy target, you know, industrial park, a bridge, airfields, you know, and things like that, you know, hard targets. And when we would go in there, you know, the SAMs would come up, and it was like a telephone pole coming up at you. And the idea was to make your break, you know, in direction by pushing the stick over and getting light in the seat, and then you'd know whether that SAM was tracking you. And then right before it got to you, you'd make a hard pull and then go full afterburner, and then the SAM would try to maneuver to take you out, and it would come apart. Mm-hmm. And so that was called a SAM break. And
how many of those did you have to do?
Oh, I did, you know, either in the front seat or the back seat. You know, I did probably 2 or 3, and that's too many.
When you're in the back seat, you have a stick? Are you able to?
In the Air Force version of the F4 Phantom, we had a stick in the back seat, mm-hmm. and
the Navy it's a radar,
it's just
radar intercept.
Just radar, yeah. But we had radar in the front seat and the back seat of the Air Force mm-hmm. version. And we had a stick in the back seat of the. In fact, Tom, when we were in training, before we upgraded to the front seat of the aircraft, we had to be able to land the aircraft. I think it was 8 or 9 times a month in our training from the back seat.
That can be a little hairy.
That was a little hairy, yeah. Particularly when you got on the runway.
Well, you had to look at through a monitor?
No, you'd have to.
You'd have to
be back and forth on both sides.
Yeah, because that pilot's right in front of you.
Yeah.
While you're in combat, on your days over in Vietnam, did you lose any friends?
Lost one, a fellow that was in my wedding. Mm-hmm. I lost him. He was a Mistifac. Mistifacs were flying F-100s, mm-hmm. and he was a Mistifac over Laos, and bless his departed soul, he had 2 daughters, mm-hmm. and Pat Carroll was his name, and he was listed as missing in action until the end of the war, and now he's been certified as being killed.
KIA, yeah.
KIA, and he graduated from pilot training with me and was in my wedding.
Yeah. We were getting close to wrapping it up. Did you ever think about staying in the Air Force, or did you have any choice?
I gave it some thought. Prior to going over there, I had a change of assignments. I was programmed to go to OV-10, Forward Air Controller School down at Fort Walton Beach, Florida, and they changed my assignment at the last minute, and sent me to Southeast Asia. I was a little bit discouraged because my son was born on December 11th, and I had to leave just a few weeks later mm-hmm. to go to Southeast Asia. So I missed the entire first year of his life, Tom, and that was a tough one.
Yeah, I know. I experienced the same thing. Mm-hmm. So, have you kept up flying since you left the service?
I have. My uncle and I both got our jet helicopter ratings. So I used to say to him, "Don't tell anybody I'm flying helicopters." But then when he purchased a couple of jet helicopters, then I was delighted that and he could tell anybody he wanted. Yeah. So we got into the aircraft industry, and as you're familiar with, his dream is to start California Pacific Airlines, and
we're going to get that
about
off the
to
ground.
accomplish that dream.
We're about to get that off the ground. So,
and we're excited about that.
Well, Ted, it's been a pleasure having you in here and talking about your experiences over in Vietnam. I mean, we haven't had many in what we call the modern wars. We've talked to a lot of guys that were in the big ones, so to speak, the World War II, but we haven't had that many Vietnam veterans, and we really appreciate it. I'm Tom Morrow. We've been talking with T.G. Vallas, former fighter pilot for the U.S. Air Force. Join us here again next time on Living Legacies.